right.
Good.
Welcome to our media availability. It is our second week in a 7-week legislative session. We had a significant discussion today on the floor with regards to changing the statute that appears, one of the statutes that appears in Washington representing Utah. We have Brigham Young and Philo T. Farnsworth. And today the Senate voted to change Mr. Farnsworth with Martha Hughes Cannon. And today with me, right here on my right, is Senator Weiler, who's the sponsor of that resolution, and we'll give him a couple of moments, and then if there's some questions from the media on that issue, we'd love to take that.
Thank you. So first I want to acknowledge my co-sponsor on the resolution, Senator Henderson. She's been really invaluable in helping me with this and getting the yellow flowers today, which signify a symbol for women's suffrage and the women's right to receive the vote. So I live only about 12 minutes north of the Capitol, and for 6 years now I've been giving tours of the Capitol, and whenever I tell the story of Martha Hughes Cannon, I'm surprised at how many people respond to her story, especially that she ran against her own husband to secure the first seat by a female in the country in the state senate. And I've been telling my constituents for 5 years, you know, one day I'm going to run a bill to put her in Washington, D.C., and everybody's like, do it, do it, do it. And I never did it, but Adam Gardner, who used to intern for Rob Bishop, he actually started this resolution and then handed it off to me when he was elected as the county recorder. And when I found out he was doing this last fall, I said to him, Adam, I've been talking about doing this for 5 years and you're actually doing it. I said, can I please be your Senate floor sponsor? And he said, sure. And so I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because Martha was a state senator. I think it's entirely appropriate that this be a Senate resolution and not a House resolution. I think with her life, she was a pioneer in medicine, she was a pioneer in the suffrage movement. As Senator Henderson likes to point out, Utah women received the right to vote about 50 years before women nationally did. And she was a pioneer, of course, in being the first female senator. She was elected in a block. We'd had a territorial legislature, and Utah became a state on, I think, January 4th, 1896. And so they had to elect now a new legislature. So they ran blocks of candidates, and she was in a block of 8 candidates as a Democrat. She had been recruited by the local Democratic Party. Her husband had been recruited. Her husband was a well-respected leader in the community, and he had been recruited to run as a Republican. She actually got over 3,000, she got just over 10,000 votes, almost 11,000 votes, but she beat her husband by over 3,000 votes, so it wasn't even close. She was over 30% more votes than he was, and according to family legend, I've talked to some of her great-grandchildren, it took Angus Cannon quite a while to get over the fact that not only did his wife run against him, but he won. She has an amazing life, amazing story. I've shared a link to the KUED documentary that they made on her life with all of the legislators. I'm hoping they'll watch it. I watched it again yesterday, and just an amazing woman. We are really hoping, and Senator Henderson and I, and even President Niederhauser has been helpful. We've been meeting with an organization called Better Days 2020. They've offered to help us raise the money, because I was adamant that this be done without taxpayer funds. As much as I love Martha Hughes Cannon, I don't believe personally that this is an appropriate use of taxpayer monies. And so Better Days 2020 has stepped up. They're going to help us raise the money. We're going to probably have to raise a couple $100,000 to have this sculpture built and transported back to Washington, D.C. And our goal is to have that in place on the 100th anniversary of women receiving the right to vote, which will happen in 2020. So with that, let me kick it to Senator Henderson see if she'd like to add anything.
Senator Henderson, could I ask you to move over there just so that our microphones can pick you up? Thank you.
Sure. Well, I was a little bit jealous of Todd when I found out that he was running this resolution, something that I feel very strongly about. And as I mentioned on the floor when I spoke in favor of this bill, it's hard to find artwork or statues or representations of real, actual living or live women, real women in Washington, D.C. Most of the females represented there are very, they're symbolic, they're allegorical, they represent ideals, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I I am really excited that we have someone here in our state that represents both, in my opinion, she was a real woman who smashed real glass ceilings, who did some real remarkable things and was a first of her in her own right, but also represents an ideal and helped elevate the political freedoms of women. And I'm really proud of that. And I think that it speaks well of us as a state. It's something that people don't know a lot about. And I think it's something that we should be proud of sharing, proud of teaching. Our school children aren't taught about this. Our school children don't know that we were the first state to, that women in our state were the first women in the modern nation to actually vote. They're not taught that. And so history really is only as good as it is remembered. And we need to remember and honor and revere our history.
Can you speak about your bill that you're running about a special license plate for women's suffrage?
Sure. So the license plate bill that I have, Senate Bill 119, will be heard in the Transportation Committee this afternoon. And it simply will create a special license plate that honors the fact that Utah women were the first to vote. It's the first to vote. Will be a first to vote license plate. And again, this is really in preparation and centered around the celebration coming up in a couple of years in 2020 of the centennial of the 19th Amendment and the 150th anniversary of women's suffrage in Utah. And I don't think we can emphasize that enough. We had it 50 years before everybody else.
What does the vote today say, though, about support for some of the ideals you're talking about? There was a pretty significant split on this.
I think the vote today was the fact that Philo Farnsworth was an amazing man, and he saved maybe hundreds of thousands of lives with his invention of the incubator and other vaccines, and that he helped create TV, which has blessed the lives of hundreds of millions of billions of people. And so I think that there is, and I try to be very careful in running this, not to try to denigrate Philo Farnsworth, because he was a great Utahn. But there are Philo fans, PHANS, out there. And I don't think the vote today was anti-women's suffrage or anti-Martha Cannon. I think it was recognizing that we have a world-class leader that's already there, and it's difficult for some people to remove him because they feel like somehow we're demoting him in that respect.
But we heard the term politically correct apply to this vote.
It was 21-7.
I mean, for the Senate, that's a pretty resounding victory. We needed 15 votes to pass the resolution. We got 21, so. And let me just say, I don't know if any of you know this, but there is a companion bill that is going to be run from the House, assuming the resolution passes. My House sponsor is Representative Becky Edwards, and she's the floor sponsor of the companion bill that I believe Senator Henderson will be the floor sponsor of the Senate. That will create a committee that will oversee the fundraising, oversee the selection of a sculpture, and approval of the designs, would oversee the transportation needs, and would also decide where Philo goes if we do replace them. And I think there's going to be a push after today's debate. Senator Davis told me he wants us to contact Senator Hatch's office and Senator Lee's office and see if we can't move Philo over to the Smithsonian. Maybe he would stay in DC in the Smithsonian as an inventor, which I would fully support that effort. But there's a lot of people that want Philo, but that bill's not numbered yet because it's still being drafted. But we did feel like forming a committee and having the state treasurer and others kind of oversee this fundraising and oversee the process would be beneficial to the state.
We have a question from online about this bill for either Senator Weiler or Senator Henderson. It says, with this being a recommendation, who makes the final decision on whether the statute is actually changed?
This is the decision to change the statute. This resolution is what Congress requires from the state. But again, we still have to raise the money, get the statute constructed and transport out there. But this is the decision, this resolution. And by the way, I wanted to point out the Yellow Roses. If you went over to the House today, you would have seen the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader and some other of the Republican leadership team and several other people wearing yellow roses. I ran out. We brought about 4 dozen up, and there were still House members asking Representative Edwards, can I please have a yellow rose? Because we wanted to send a message that this bill has support not only in the Senate, but also in the House, and I do expect it will pass.
On that note, yeah, how do you?
You know, it won't be unanimous, but I was pleased to see so many members of the House majority step up, put on their yellow roses, and I think that's a very good sign that this bill will do well in the House, so.
But the last person to sign off on it will be the governor.
Yes, of course. And I will note, I know I have a good friend in the governor's office, Mike Maurer, who's a very big fan of Philo Farnsworth. But Spencer Cox was retweeting my Martha Cannon tweets last night, so I'm hopeful that the governor will be.
Well, if you get 2/3 in the House, and
yeah,
2/3 in the Senate,
that's right.
you could always override it.
Yeah, well, hopefully it won't come to that.
Yeah.
so.
Can
Hopefully
I
it
just,
isn't.
sorry, I just wanted to ask why it's a resolution instead of a bill?
Well, the resolution is what you would take, it's a statement of intent that we want to change it out. The bill that's being run from the House would just kind of do the logistics of how we're going to choose the sculpture and how the money would be administered that's raised. And I hope all of your listeners will, if you support Martha, we need to raise this money quickly so that this sculpture can be completed in time for the 2020 anniversary, so.
So I have a question, are they going to take and try and duplicate, or has that been
I think that will go to the committee.
the statute that's out here?
Yeah, by the way, I forgot her
Which is
name.
a really nice
Yeah,
statute.
yeah, that may be the case, but the sculptor who did the statue of Martha Hughes Cannon that sits outside the Capitol, she did that 21 years ago. She contacted me via email today, wanted to support these efforts, and she let me know that she spent a year studying the life of Martha Hughes Cannon before she sculpted that statue. But she said she was a finalist to sculpt the statue of Philo back in the late 80s. And she wanted me to know, having studied the lives of both of these fine individuals, she felt it was entirely appropriate that Martha Hughes Cannon represent Utah, and she wanted to know if she could help, you know, in that regard. So I thought that was interesting that she was, and she pointed out to me she was 36 when she sculpted this statue, and Martha Hughes Cannon was 36 when she was elected to the Senate. So she felt a connection there.
Any other questions on the Martha Hughes Cannon resolution? All right, we'll take maybe a couple more questions on other issues from the media.
What are we at on bills?
So as of today, 134 Senate bills have been introduced, and 272 House bills have been introduced. We've only had a total of 5 bills pass the legislature total yet, but we've got, let's see, 31 Senate bills over in the House, and the House has 29 Senate bills over here.
House
So-
bills over here.
Sorry, House has 29 House bills over here. So we're just working, committees are doing their jobs now.
Senator Maine, we didn't give you an opportunity to speak. I know that it's an important issue for you also.
It is, and I have my flower on. I think that, obviously I support this, and I think Mr. Farnsworth, sorry, has had celebration for many years, and I think that where it should be, he's been honored. But I think as things evolve, there's other places of honor for him, and we appreciate that. But I think that I'm really excited to have a male and a female from the state of Utah. I think we need to celebrate all, and her accomplishments and things that she's done for women and for the state. I think it's a shared responsibility, and I think it's a shared honor. So I'm delighted to vote for the resolution today, and hope that it will, that as time goes on, that all Utahns will be proud of that, because we walk hand in hand, male and female, for legislation and for the good of the state.
Thank you. There's no other questions. I guess we'll
Thank you.
close and we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you for watching.